We're here from Bringing Up Book Lovers. Today, homeschooling veteran and author Phyllis Wheeler, that's me,
and homeschooling mom Sarah Boble are here to talk about While I Was Away by Waka Brown. And we're gonna talk to Waka after Phyllis and I do the little review, so make sure you stay tuned for that. Phyllis, can you give a little summary of the book?
Sure. This book is actually historical. It's set in the early 1980s, and it's about a girl who is Japanese American. She's growing up here and turning more and more American, and her mother really wants her to be able to read and write Japanese and also understand the Japanese culture. So her parents send her back to Japan for 5 months, during which they expect her to, learn all that stuff. And they tell her that she must stay with her grandmother, although there are some other relatives there, some aunts and uncles, who have little cousins and so on. So Waka, little Waka, complains, but because grandmother is sort of a dour personality, but she does stay with grandmother, and she has various challenges in school with socially, and being teased, like being called stupid, and but she perseveres. And the main conflict has to do with the grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out that it is a memoir. We don't find that out until the end, but I'm going to spoil it for you because I kind of wish I had known that to start with, because I was expecting certain story elements to fall into place the way they would in a fiction story, and they were kind of not doing that very fast. So I was wondering what was going on. So it is a memoir. That's why.
So given that it's a memoir, did you think it passed the good story test?
Uh, well, I thought that it was a little slow in places. The pace lagged a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I were a Japanese American kid reading this, I might be very interested in all these details that she goes into about food and so on. And I think it depends on the audience, probably.
Yeah.
But it does, and it has this tension thing going on with grandma, and it does kind of pull you through this story. So, yeah, it's good.
Okay. Yeah, I think my daughter will enjoy reading the parts about life in Japan. Like, I think she'll think it's fun and interesting just as a cultural experience. How about themes? Did you notice any themes that stood out in the book?
Well, perseverance is definitely one. Um, she's doing so dismally on her reading and writing when she first starts, and it's so discouraging. But she doesn't give up, and she doesn't spend a whole lot of time pursuing social relationships, because, well, she figures out pretty soon that most of the ones around her, most of the kids around her are not actually very positive relationships for her.
Mm-hmm.
So she kind of buries herself in her studies and uh, perseveres.
Yeah. Um, how about the character development? Did you change much?
I think, well, she comes to understand grandma better. And that is, I'd say that is kind of a growing up sort of a moment, where
Yeah.
you kind of realize, oh, this person is a real human being, and they had challenges when they were younger, and it's affected who they are and how they react to people. So there's some of that going on, just kind of some growing up.
Yeah. How about any memorable scenes?
I don't know. I keep thinking of her washing her clothes. She has to, when she gets home from school, change clothes and then wash her clothes with this little washboard in kind of this little bathtub shower thingy, which I'm not fully visualizing, but I'm just visualizing her, like scrubbing on her little washboard, her clothes every day and hanging them up to dry.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I think one of the things that stuck in my mind as when I was a kid, I was a collector of Hello Kitty stationery and pencils and whatnot. Was she took a trip to a stationery store in Japan with her cousin, and they talked about like the writing paper and the pencils and the erasers and the pencil cases and stuff like that. So I took me back because I had all that stuff when I was a kid too.
Well, I've never really understood the allure of Hello Kitty until now.
Oh, well, if you see an entire Sanrio store, then you'll understand. It's just cute and all these little things that are so functional and at the same time colorful and everything. So, how about overall likes and dislikes of this book?
Um, well, I really liked, this eye opening my eyes to Japanese culture, which, I've never read a book about Japanese culture before.
Hmm.
So this was a first for me, and I've observed, these highly achieving Asian kids before and kind of like wondered like, why they're kind of different from me. Not that I'm not a high achiever, but or at least trying to be, but it's just sort of different. So um, this helped me understand where that might be coming from.
Hmm.
And what else? There were no nothing to worry about in terms of language or
Yeah.
inappropriateness for a very young child. You could certainly read this to your young children. But it's not a page turner, really. It's more of a, I don't know, leisurely read sort of a book.
Yeah. Yeah. The memoir part, I didn't find out about that until I finished it as well. And I was like, oh, that makes more sense. It's
Yeah.
her memories of her time in Japan from like decades ago. And
If you had a fiction story, you could nicely tie up this relationship with the grandma,
yeah.
but she's not reporting that. She's reporting some, unresolved interaction and so on, which is very real. In fact, it was real.
Yeah.
So, you know, yeah.
All right. Well, I also, like you, enjoyed learning more about the Japanese culture, especially kind of heading into the Olympics this summer. So I, plan to have my daughter read this. I think she'll really enjoy kind of the visualization of the classroom and all the kids wearing their red backpacks, and she might be inspired by the bath ritual. We'll see. So, anyone else out there who's interested in having your kids learn a little bit more about Japan and Japanese culture, since we're going to be seeing Tokyo on the news later this summer, check out While I Was Away by Waka T. Brown next time you go to the library. Thanks for watching. Oh, stay for the interview. So we're here with Waka Brown, the author of While I Was Away. And we're just going to ask her a few questions about the book and about writing the book. So it's pretty different from a lot of the other books that we've reviewed. A lot of those books, even if they're about other cultures, they're from the perspective of other culture in America, and you did other culture, I mean, America in other culture, this being Japan. So I know it's kind of largely a memoir, from your memories. So I was wondering why you chose to write the book in general.
It's a story that I had been sitting on for a really long time. Like, even after I came back from Japan, I was like, someday I feel like I should write about this. And I didn't for a really, really long time. And a few years ago, I tried to write like a fictionalized version of it, and it came across as kind of inauthentic. And so I put it aside. And then I was telling another writer about this, and they were like, no, we really think you should write that story. So I revisited it, and that's why I ended up writing it. Like, it was something that I had wanted to write for a very, very long time.
So you had like writing ambitions as a child then?
Yeah, when I was going through like old letters and journals, there's an entry in my diary from like 1985 that was like, I'm going to write a book someday. So yeah. And I actually started out in my 20s, like writing screenplays. And nothing's been like sold or produced or made into a feature film. But since I wasn't having any success other than like a small short film being produced, I decided, well, maybe I should switch gears and try this.
Yeah. So I was curious because I read, your after thoughts. I can't remember what it's called. Your notes at the end of the book.
Yeah.
And you had mentioned in there that it was a lot of, your memories and kind of looking through old diaries. I was wondering if there was any other research that you had to do to write about life in Japan in the 80s or life in America in the 80s and the relationship between those places or anything there.
Like looking through my friends' letters, I remember coming across some things, and I'm like, I don't know. I don't remember that eclipse, because like I mentioned an eclipse that happened that was viewable in the US, but it wasn't viewable in Japan. And I didn't remember the eclipse being a thing in Japan. So that's like one thing I had to research. I had to look at the eclipse and see if it was viewable in Japan and why I didn't see it, or if I had just forgotten about it. And so that was something I had to research. For Japan, the iPhone and like the constant camera, accessibility wasn't there when I was a kid. I didn't have a camera then either. And so to help like jog the memory a little bit, I would look at like what 1980s Japan was like, and tried to find some other photos from around that time. And so there was a lot of research in that way. Also looking at my old school, and I don't remember every single lunch I had there, but then I looked up their menu and I'm like, oh yeah.
Cool.
Like so things like that.
Yeah. I particularly liked your description of the stationery stores and the school supplies, because I definitely had a Hello Kitty pencil box when I was a kid that had a little pop out drawer for the like erasers and like the stationery. It was very fun.
Yeah, and I kept a lot of those things too. So that helped me describe them, because I still kept like the very precious things from that time.
Yeah. So I was kind of surprised when you described your family in Japan as Catholic. That's not common, right?
No, it's not very common. It's a pretty small percentage of the population.
Yeah.
But my mom grew up Catholic, and my dad converted. Like, his family is Buddhist, I believe, and then he converted when he was an adult.
Okay. And then
actually how they met. Their priest introduced the two of them. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Good connection. So I thought I was really shocked. I was like, oh, they're going to mass, and I kind of remember hearing that like the Christian population in Japan is like so tiny that like the odds of reading about that would have been pretty small, I thought. So
yeah.
So I had a question about kind of the dynamics of the kids in the book. You described like how they were like, the girls at least hung out in groups and they were pretty exclusive. And it seemed like that felt weird to you. I was wondering how that is actually different from like a clique in a school, that, is in the US.
Well, I was fortunate to attend the same school from the time I was in kindergarten all the way through when I graduated high school. And so, like, I made friends from different times. Like, I actually still have some friends from preschool, and like, I definitely had friends I was closer to at different times of my life, but they didn't care if I hung out with someone else,
Right.
for a day or a week. It felt like even if you had your core group of friends, like they didn't care if you wandered off and hung out with someone else like on a Friday night,
Right.
And so it felt a little bit more relaxed. I mean, there are definitely cliques in middle school. And, I wasn't like part of the popular group anyway. So I didn't participate in that dynamic. Like um, I'm sure there was drama in a different way. Like if you were a member of the popular group, I don't know, since I wasn't really part of that. But yeah, when I was in Japan, it felt a lot more rigid, like almost like there were rules. Like in the US, I felt like there might have been some expectations or thoughts, but not rules,
Right. I was wondering, do you have any insight on how those groups formed? It seemed like the one that you ended up joining was kind of like made up of leftover people in a way, of like kids who weren't in the first. So is that like, I don't know, like I wasn't sure if that was something that was like common all across Japan in schools, and like was it like a class thing, or like was it based on looks, or kind of,
Well,
I was just
it
kind of curious
was
about that.
hard for me to really understand because, like, in the book, I mentioned that I had been there for a shorter period of time in fourth grade, and I
Yeah.
didn't really sense anything in fourth grade, but then when I went back in sixth grade, I really sensed it. So I don't know how they
Yeah.
formed, because I remember being very surprised
Yeah.
at that time, like, oh, there are separate groups, and
Hmm.
I guess I had assumed it was a lot more fluid, like in the US. So I felt
Yeah.
like that was really weird.
Yeah. Yeah. I was reading that. So I was thinking that was my impression. That was really weird.
Yeah.
um, but it was also interesting. Because I feel like Asian cultures kind of tend to have more biases sometimes, and formed for like what to an American would seem like kind of irrational reasons. So I didn't know if it was something related to that. But um, so I think probably my last official question is, what would you hope that readers learn from your book? And I know you're sharing a piece of your life, and that's um yeah, kind of part of it, but broadly speaking, like a lot of the people who listen to our or watch our channel are homeschooling parents.
Mhm.
So I like to pick books where my kids will learn about a different kind of person, a different kind of place. It's kind of like a kill two birds with one stone. It's literature, and it's history or social studies or something like that. So what about, from the perspective of the author, what would you say are some hopes for your readers?
Well, I think one of the main hopes is that, like, the middle grade readers who come across this realize that it's just a episode of my life, and I am
Mm,
not famous. I am not, a celebrity, but it's a story, and I think that everybody has a story. Like, they have stories. They have
mm,
important stories that they can tell. And so that's one thing I'd like readers to come away with. Another thing too is, I know a lot of people don't have the opportunity to travel, especially now,
mhm.
and especially young kids. There are kids who won't, be on an airplane until, like, maybe for their whole lives.
Right.
And so I wanted to write this book as kind of a way they can visit Japan and experience a different culture without having to leave.
Right.
And so that's something else I wanted readers to come away with. And also, you know, in the end, it's just really easier to be yourself. Like, I think it's much harder not to be yourself
Yeah.
in an effort to fit in. And whatever difficulties you do come across, being yourself are less than not being yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. I mean, I'm excited for my daughter to read it early in the summer since the Olympics are going to be in Japan, so she'll get to see some stuff on TV about that too. So I think that'll be fun. So actually, I do have one more. Is there anything you're working on right now for middle grades readers?
Well, I do have a second book coming out.
Okay.
That comes out in early 2022.
Okay.
And that is a work of fiction, but it still has a Japanese American 12-year-old protagonist, but this one takes place in Kansas. And so it looks at the American dream from the perspective of a child of immigrants,
Right.
and kind of explores her 7th grade year as she navigates all these dreams that she has, and whether she can achieve them.
Yeah. Cool. That's exciting. That's kind of like, I didn't grow up in the Midwest. I grew up on the East Coast, but also child of immigrants, and it's a different perspective on the, you know, American dream and what you hope to accomplish as a generation than, you know, kids who've been here and families who've grown up here.
Right.
Next time you go to the library, go on Amazon, check out While I Was Away by Waka T. Brown. Sorry about the glare. Thank you for your time. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.